In this video, we'll answer the question, what is a smart object? We'll see how you can make non-destructive edits to the smart object without affecting the original pixel information within. Here I have a scan of a nice red autumn leaf. It's on its own transparent layer, and if I hide the white behind it, you can see that it is indeed transparent. I'm going to make a copy of this layer by dragging it down to the new layer icon in my layers panel. There's the new layer called leaf copy, and I'll just move it over to the side of the original. Now I'm going to turn this one into a smart object, and you can do that one of three ways. You can either go up to the layer menu, to Smart Objects, and choose Convert to Smart Object, or you can go to the Layers panel itself and choose Convert to Smart Object, or you can simply right-click on the layer thumbnail and choose Convert to Smart Object. Now they look identical, but you can see this icon on the layer thumbnail indicating that this is a smart object. And what Photoshop has done here is put the pixel data of this layer into a special container. So let's see what we mean by that. I'm going to select the original leaf layer here on the left and go up to my Edit menu and choose Free Transform. And now I'll reduce this so it's really tiny and hit my Return or Enter key to commit to that transformation. So when you transform something and you reduce it like this, Photoshop decides, I don't need all of these extra pixels that I needed when that image was large, and it just throws them away. Well, what happens if we want to return this image to close to its original size? I'll go back up to the Edit menu and choose Free Transform again. I can also press Command-T or Control-T on Windows, and I'll try to make it about the same size as it was originally. And you can see what's happening here. It's looking really pixelated. So now when I hit Return or Enter, or I click the check mark to commit to that transformation, Photoshop is going to try to invent pixels, just make them up, to try to fill in all of that information that it threw away in the last step. And you can see it just can't do it. There's no way it can just come up with pixels that don't exist. Now let's contrast that with the smart object. I'll select that layer over here in my Layers panel, and once again I'll go to Free Transform. I'll press Command-T this time, and I'll make this really tiny like I did with the other one, and hit Return or Enter. Now I'll transform that again and return it to close to its original size, and when I hit Return you can see there's no loss of quality whatsoever. So again, the smart object acts as a container that protects the original pixel data in that image. Here's another way to understand what a smart object is. I'm going to select that original leaf layer again, and if I go to Free Transform, you can see in my control panel here that the size is 100%. I'll hit the Escape key to get out of that, and I'll select the smart object, and when I go to Free Transform, you can see that now it's about 92.5%, and that's the size that I enlarged it to just a moment ago. So Photoshop has remembered that information. Also note that the handles of the Free Transform bounding box are solid instead of hollow the way they are with a regular Free Transform. That's just another small visual indication that you're working with a smart object. So I could reduce this all the way down to 20% and then confirm that transformation. And now when I go back to Free Transform by pressing Command-T on my keyboard, you can see that that value 20% is still in my control panel. And again, Photoshop is remembering that information, keeping track of those transformations in the smart object. One of the greatest things about smart objects and how you really begin to see their power is that you can distort and modify and otherwise edit the smart object while leaving the contents of the smart object, that is the original pixel data, intact. So let's see what I mean by that. Now here's my original leaf smart object, and now I'll go back to Free Transform by pressing Command-T. And this time I'm really going to distort this. I'm going to right-click on that and choose Warp, and I'll make this into kind of an S shape or a sail shape, really just curving that as much as I can, and I'll click the check mark or Return or Enter to commit to that transformation. Now I can edit the contents of that smart object by double-clicking on it. You can also go up to the Layer menu and choose Smart Objects, Edit Contents, but it's much more easier to double-click. And when I do that, I get this message. And this is telling me that I'm about to edit the contents of the smart object, and any changes I make will be reflected back in the original PSD. So I'm going to click OK, and here's the contents of my smart object. And this is a special file, a .psb. And again, this is the original pixel data of that leaf scan that I started with. So let's say I want to change the color of this leaf. I'll just use my color replacement tool and turn this sort of back into a summer leaf instead of an autumn one. I'll do this very quickly. And now when I close this and save it, as you can see, that color has been updated, but the transformation I applied to the smart object remains. You can see I'm getting this prohibited symbol when I pass my cursor on top of the leaf, and that's because I can't edit the pixel data directly of the smart object. I can only do it when I edit the contents. So again, I'll double-click to edit those contents. I'll get the warning message. You can turn this off if you don't want to see it, but I'll just leave it here as a reminder. And when I click OK, that .psd opens up. And let's change our color back. I'll pick something else. Let's say yellow. And this is changing it more into a sage green than a yellow. And now I'll just move this out of the way. I don't actually have to close it and save it. I can go up to the File menu and choose Save. And when I do, you can see that that color change is reflected in the PSD, still with that same really distorted transformation that I did earlier. So again, you can think of the smart object as a super protective container of that original pixel data, and you can scale, distort, rotate, warp, all you want, but the contents inside the smart object container are protected. As we'll see in upcoming videos, this is only the beginning of what you can do with smart objects. In the next lesson, we'll see how you can place a file, whether it be a vector, a PDF, or a raster image, as a smart object. See you then.